The red and blue lights flooded the rearview mirror like a warning from the universe itself, painting the interior of the black sedan in alternating pulses of color that turned the quiet stretch of Highway 12 into something that felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. Michael Okonkwo glanced at his speedometer. 53 miles per hour in a 55 zone. His turn signal had been used at every lane change. His registration was current, his insurance valid, his record spotless. There was no legal reason for this stop. But Michael Okonkwo had been a black man in America for 51 years, and he understood that legal reasons were not always required. He guided his vehicle onto the gravel shoulder with the practiced calm of someone who had been through this ritual too many times to count. The August heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves that distorted the approaching patrol car in his side mirror. Cicadas screamed in the tall grass beyond the shoulder. The air conditioning hummed its mechanical lullaby as Michael placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, exactly where they could be seen, exactly where they could not be misinterpreted. The patrol car door opened. Deputy Kyle Mercer of the Hardin County Sheriff's Department stepped out with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest made him untouchable. He was 34 years old, 6 feet tall, with the kind of muscular build that suggested hours in the gym and the kind of sneer that suggested those hours had done nothing to improve his character. His right hand rested on the grip of his service weapon as he approached the sedan. His left hand held a flashlight despite the blazing afternoon sun. Michael watched him come. He had seen that walk before. That hand position. That expression of contempt barely concealed beneath a thin veneer of professional detachment. He had seen it on traffic stops, in airport security lines, in the lobbies of hotels where desk clerks seemed surprised that he could afford a suite. He had learned to read these situations the way a meteorologist reads storm patterns, and every indicator told him that Deputy Kyle Mercer was a storm about to break. The deputy reached the driver's window and stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, letting the silence stretch into something that was meant to intimidate. Michael remained perfectly still, his hands visible, his breathing controlled. Finally, Mercer spoke. His voice carried the thick accent of rural Virginia, but beneath the drawl was something harder, something that had nothing to do with geography. "License and registration, now!" Michael kept his voice neutral. "I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket for my wallet. I want you to know that before I move." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Did I ask for commentary? I said license and registration. Make it quick." Michael moved slowly, deliberately, telegraphing every motion as if his life depended on it. Because, as history had demonstrated too many times, it might. He retrieved his wallet from his jacket pocket, extracted his license, then reached across to the glove compartment for the registration. He handed both documents through the window. Mercer snatched them without a word and studied the license. His lips moved slightly as he read the name. When he looked up, his expression had shifted into something that Michael recognized immediately. Not confusion, not professionalism. Something uglier. Michael Okonkwo. He pronounced the name with exaggerated difficulty, stretching the syllables as if they were foreign objects in his mouth. "That African or something?" "Nigerian. My father immigrated in 1968. Mercer nodded slowly, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Nigerian. Right. Long way from home, aren't you?" Michael said nothing. There was nothing productive to say. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, Deputy, I do not." "Really?" Mercer leaned closer to the window, close enough that Michael could smell coffee and cigarette smoke on his breath. "Because I've been watching you for about 6 miles now. Driving a vehicle like this, in clothes like that, through a neighborhood like this. You don't exactly fit the profile if you understand what I'm saying." Michael understood exactly what he was saying. The sedan was a government-issued vehicle, black and unremarkable, the kind of car that federal employees drove when they wanted to avoid attention. His clothes were business casual, appropriate for the meeting he had just left in Richmond. And the neighborhood, such as it was, consisted of farmland and forest and small communities where the population was overwhelmingly white. He did not fit the profile, because the profile was nothing more than the color of his skin. "Deputy, I'm traveling on legitimate business. I've broken no traffic laws. I'd appreciate if we could handle this professionally. Mercer's smile vanished. Are you telling me how to do my job? I'm making a request, not giving an order. Sounds like an order to me. Mercer stepped back from the window, his hand tightening on his weapon. Step out of the vehicle, now. Michael felt his pulse increase slightly, but kept his external composure absolutely steady. He had been trained in crisis situations. He had overseen operations that involved hostage negotiations, armed standoffs, and the kind of high-stakes confrontations that would have shattered lesser men. But none of that training made this moment any less dangerous. A traffic stop could become a death sentence in the span of a heartbeat. Statistics and headlines had proven that reality again and again. He opened the door slowly and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, keeping his hands visible at all times. The heat hit him like a wall, the sun beating down on his shaved head with merciless intensity. He turned to face Deputy Mercer and found himself looking down the barrel of a drawn weapon. His stomach dropped, but his expression never changed. Hands on the vehicle. Spread your legs! Deputy, I need to inform you of something before this goes any further. Mercer's voice rose to a shout. I said hands on the vehicle! Do it now, or I will put you on the ground! Michael complied, pressing his palms against the hot metal of the sedan's roof, feeling the heat sear his skin. He spread his legs and stared at his own reflection in the tinted window as Mercer approached from behind. That's better. Mercer's voice was close now, right behind Michael's left ear. See, that wasn't so hard. You people just need to learn to follow instructions. Would save everyone a lot of trouble. You people. The words hung in the air like a verdict already rendered. Mercer began a rough search, patting down Michael's sides, his back, his legs. When he reached Michael's right hip, he stopped. What do we have here? Deputy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Shut up. Mercer pulled Michael's jacket aside, revealing the holstered firearm at his hip. His voice went cold with what sounded almost like satisfaction. Well. You want to tell me why you're carrying a concealed weapon? If you'll allow me to explain, I asked you a question. Mercer grabbed Michael's shoulder and spun him around, pressing the barrel of his own weapon against Michael's chest. You're carrying a gun, driving through my county, and you think you can just explain your way out of this? Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? Michael looked directly into Mercer's eyes. He had faced terrorists and criminals and foreign operatives who would have killed him without hesitation. He had maintained his composure in situations that would have broken most people. But there was something particularly chilling about facing this kind of threat from someone who was supposed to represent law and order. Deputy Mercer, I am going to say this once, and I need you to hear every word. My name is Michael Okonkwo. I am the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The weapon I am carrying is my service firearm, authorized under federal law. My credentials are in my wallet, which you are currently holding. If you look in the billfold behind my driver's license, you will find my FBI identification and my badge. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The cicadas continued their endless chorus. The heat continued to shimmer off the asphalt. The barrel of Mercer's weapon remained pressed against Michael's chest. Then Mercer laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of a man who had heard excuses before, who believed himself to be immune to consequences, who had absolute confidence in his own power and authority. FBI Deputy Director. Right. And I'm the President of the United States. He shoved Michael back against the vehicle. You know what I think? I think you're a drug runner. I think this fancy car and these fancy clothes are all bought with dirty money. And I think that gun is illegal as hell. You're going to jail, boy. And I'm going to enjoy every minute of putting you there. The word landed like a slap. Boy, loaded with centuries of history, with chains and whips and burning crosses, with the systematic dehumanization of an entire people. Michael felt something shift inside him. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity that came from understanding exactly what he was dealing with. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a case of excessive caution or poor judgment. Deputy Kyle Mercer knew exactly what he was doing. He had targeted Michael because of his race. He was enjoying this exercise of power. and he believed, with absolute certainty, that nothing could touch him. He was wrong. Deputy Mercer, I am asking you one final time to examine my credentials. What happens in the next few minutes will determine the trajectory of the rest of your life. I am giving you a chance to correct this situation before it becomes irreversible. Mercer leaned close, his breath hot on Michael's face. The only thing that's irreversible is your trip to the county lockup. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for carrying a concealed weapon, resisting arrest, and threatening a law enforcement officer. I have not resisted, and I have made no threats. You're resisting right now by not following my orders. Mercer holstered his weapon and reached for his handcuffs. And telling me you're FBI when you're clearly just another criminal trying to talk his way out of trouble. That's a threat to my intelligence. He grabbed Michael's wrist and began to force it behind his back. The handcuffs clicked around the first wrist, then the second. Michael offered no resistance, but he also did not look away from the reflection of Mercer's face in the car window. Deputy, in approximately 4 minutes, you are going to wish you had listened to me. Mercer laughed again as he marched Michael toward the patrol car. 4 minutes, huh? What happens in 4 minutes? Your spaceship comes to pick you up? No, my security detail catches up to me. I left the meeting in Richmond earlier than expected, and they're approximately 5 miles behind us. They saw your lights go on when you initiated this stop. They've already called for backup. Federal backup. For the first time, something flickered across Mercer's face. Not quite doubt, but perhaps the first shadow of uncertainty. Then he shook his head and opened the back door of the patrol car. Get in. We'll see about your imaginary security detail at the station. Michael lowered himself into the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him, his eyes fixed forward. The door slammed. Mercer walked around to the driver's side, got in, and pulled out onto the highway without another word. They drove for approximately 2 minutes before the radio crackled to life. All units, be advised we have federal law enforcement vehicles inbound to your location at high speed. They are requesting immediate contact with Deputy Mercer. Repeat, federal officers requesting immediate contact with Deputy Mercer regarding a traffic stop on Highway 12. Mercer's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He did not respond to the dispatch. Deputy Mercer, please respond. Federal officers are indicating that you may have their superior in custody. Please confirm your situation and location. Still no response. Michael watched the back of Mercer's head, saw the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. The reality was beginning to penetrate. Then, in the rearview mirror, Michael saw them. 3 black SUVs, moving at high speed, their grille lights flashing in the distinctive pattern of federal emergency vehicles. They closed the distance with terrifying speed, surrounding the patrol car within seconds. Mercer pulled to the shoulder. His face had gone pale. The lead SUV stopped directly in front of the patrol car, blocking any possibility of escape. Doors opened. Men and women in tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn, their FBI jackets bright yellow against the green of the roadside foliage. A woman approached the patrol car, her weapon trained on Mercer through the windshield. Her voice was amplified by a loudspeaker. Deputy Mercer, you are ordered to exit your vehicle immediately with your hands visible. Do not reach for your weapon. Do not make any sudden movements. Comply with all instructions or force will be used. For a long moment, Mercer did not move. Michael could see his mind working, could almost hear the calculations running through his head. Fight or flight, bluster or surrender. The options had narrowed to nothing. Finally, slowly, Mercer opened his door and stepped out with his hands raised. There's been a misunderstanding. I was conducting a lawful traffic stop and... Get on the ground, now! The command left no room for negotiation. Mercer dropped to his knees, then to his stomach, his cheek pressed against the hot gravel. Within seconds, federal agents had secured his weapon and placed him in handcuffs, exactly as he had done to Michael just minutes before. The woman who had given the orders approached the back of the patrol car and opened the door. She was Special Agent Patricia Vasquez, Michael's senior security officer, and her expression was a mask of controlled fury. Sir, are you injured? I'm fine, Patricia. A little uncomfortable, but fine. She helped him out of the vehicle and removed the handcuffs that Mercer had placed on him. Michael rubbed his wrists, feeling the blood return to his fingers. Sir, I've already contacted the director. He's personally reaching out to the governor and the state attorney general. This is going to move fast. Michael nodded. He turned to look at Mercer, who was being lifted to his feet by two federal agents, his own handcuffs now binding his wrists behind his back. Deputy Mercer. The man looked up, and for the first time, Michael saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who had just realized that the universe operates by rules he never understood. I told you that what happened in those 4 minutes would determine the trajectory of the rest of your life. I gave you a chance. You chose not to take it. Mercer's face contorted. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? You should have told me who you were. I did tell you. 3 times. You chose not to listen. You were too busy calling me boy. The word hung between them, freighted with everything it represented. Mercer's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. There was nothing to say. Michael turned away and walked toward one of the waiting SUVs. Behind him, he heard Agent Vasquez reading Mercer his rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. The investigation that followed was swift, thorough, and devastating. Federal agents obtained the dashcam footage from Mercer's patrol car, which captured every word of the encounter in crisp digital clarity. They obtained the body camera footage as well, which Mercer had conveniently failed to activate until after he had drawn his weapon, a violation of department policy that suggested consciousness of guilt. But even the partial recording was damning enough. They obtained Mercer's personnel file, which revealed a history of complaints from Black and Latino motorists, complaints that had been systematically dismissed by supervisors without investigation. They obtained text messages between Mercer and other deputies that were saturated with racial slurs, violent fantasies, and jokes about planting evidence. They obtained records of traffic stops that showed Mercer pulled over minority drivers at a rate 8 times higher than white drivers in the same area. They obtained testimony from former colleagues who described a culture of racism and impunity within the department. They obtained financial records that suggested Mercer had been stealing money from motorists during traffic stops, pocketing cash and valuables that never made it into evidence logs. The picture that emerged was not of a single bad actor, but of a systemic failure. Sheriff Ronald Patterson had known about Mercer's behavior for years and had done nothing. Internal complaints had been buried. Supervisors had looked the other way. The citizens of Hardin County had been policed by a department that treated its badge as a license to terrorize rather than protect. Kyle Mercer was charged with federal civil rights violations, assault, illegal detention, falsifying police reports, and theft. The federal charges alone carried a maximum sentence of 40 years. The state added charges of official misconduct and brandishing a weapon, adding another potential decade. His trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented the video evidence, the text messages, the pattern of behavior that stretched back nearly a decade. They called witnesses who had been victims of Mercer's racism, men and women who had been humiliated and terrorized during traffic stops, who had been too afraid to come forward until they learned they were not alone. The defense tried to argue that Mercer had been following standard procedures, that the stop had been legitimate, that the escalation had been a reasonable response to a perceived threat. But the video did not lie. The words did not disappear. The gun pressed against an innocent man's chest could not be explained away. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge spoke directly to Mercer before pronouncing judgment. You were entrusted with the authority to protect and serve the citizens of this community. Instead, you used that authority to terrorize them. You targeted people because of the color of their skin. You humiliated them. You threatened them. You treated your badge as permission to indulge your worst impulses without consequence. There must be consequences. There will be consequences. Kyle Mercer was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison, to be followed by 8 years in state prison, the sentences to run consecutively. He would be nearly 70 years old before he was eligible for release. His peace officer certification was permanently revoked. He would never wear a badge again. But the accountability did not end with Mercer. Sheriff Ronald Patterson was forced to resign when the investigation revealed the extent of his knowledge and inaction. He was subsequently charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to violate civil rights. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges and received 5 years in federal prison. 6 other deputies were terminated. 4 faced criminal charges. The department was placed under federal oversight, with a court-appointed monitor to supervise reforms over a 5-year period. The state legislature, prompted by the scandal, passed comprehensive police reform legislation. The new laws mandated bias training, required regular audits of traffic stop data, created independent oversight boards, and eliminated qualified immunity for officers who violated constitutional rights. The governor signed the bill in a ceremony that Michael Okonkwo attended as a guest of honor. The ripple effects spread far beyond Virginia. The case became a national story, a symbol of both the problem and the possibility of accountability. Departments across the country reviewed their own practices. Citizens who had been silent about their experiences found the courage to come forward. The conversation about racial bias in policing, which had simmered for decades, reached a boiling point that could no longer be ignored. Michael Okonkwo continued his work at the FBI, but he also became an advocate for reform. He testified before Congress about the need for federal standards in policing. He met with civil rights organizations, with community groups, with families who had lost loved ones to police violence. He used his position and his platform to demand change that went far beyond any single case. In an interview 3 months after the trial, he was asked what had gone through his mind when Mercer drew his weapon and pressed it against his chest. "I thought about my son," Michael said. "He's 23 years old. He drives a car. He gets pulled over sometimes. And I thought, what if this had been him instead of me? What if he didn't have a security detail 5 miles behind him? What if he didn't have credentials that could eventually force accountability? How many young black men have faced exactly this situation and not survived it?" That's what I was thinking. Not about myself. About all of them. The interviewer asked if he felt vindicated by the outcome. Vindication isn't the word I would use. Justice was served, yes. But justice for me doesn't erase the injustice that others have suffered. It doesn't bring back the lives that have been lost. It doesn't heal the trauma that entire communities carry. What I feel is responsibility. The responsibility to make sure this never happens again. Not to me. Not to anyone. Hardin County is a different place now. The Sheriff's Department operates under new leadership, with new training, new oversight, and new accountability measures. Traffic stops are recorded from beginning to end. Complaints are investigated by independent reviewers. Officers who demonstrate bias are removed before they can cause harm. Community trust, which had been shattered over decades of abuse, is slowly being rebuilt. Town hall meetings bring together residents and law enforcement in conversations that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Young people who once feared the police are beginning to consider careers in law enforcement, drawn by the possibility of being part of the solution rather than the problem. The road where Michael Okonkwo was stopped has a historical marker now, placed by the County Historical Society. It tells the story of what happened there, of the deputy who believed himself above the law and the man who proved him wrong. Visitors stop to read it sometimes, to take photographs, to reflect on what it means. And somewhere in a federal penitentiary, Kyle Mercer wakes up every morning in a cell that measures 8 feet by 10 feet. He has 21 more years to think about the choices he made on that August afternoon. 21 years to contemplate the moment when he looked at a man's skin color and decided that was all he needed to know. 21 years to understand that the badge he once wore came with responsibilities he never bothered to honor. The system that protected him is gone. The power he wielded is gone. The swagger that carried him down that highway is gone. What remains is accountability. What remains is justice. What remains is the truth that no one, no matter how powerful they believe themselves to be, is above the law. Michael Okonkwo still drives that same highway sometimes, on his way to visit family or attend community events in the region. He passes the spot where he was stopped, where a gun was pressed against his chest, where a man called him boy and expected him to accept it. He does not slow down. He does not look back. He keeps his eyes on the road ahead, on the work that still needs to be done. on the country that still needs to become what it has always promised to be. The fight continues. It always continues. But on that day, on that highway, in that courtroom where a guilty verdict was read aloud, justice won. And sometimes, that's enough to keep going. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that accountability is possible and that courage matters, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We read every single one. If you believe these stories need to be heard, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not already part of this community, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because every time we share these moments of justice, we remind the world that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward accountability. Keep watching, keep believing, and never stop demanding better.